We kick off, Steve, with good, if unsurprising, news in the Metro. Free speech staggers on, but polite fiction, I fear, is dead.
So J.K. Rowling won't face police action despite inviting arrest over Scotland's new hate crime law. I don't know if it's even been mentioned on this show, but Scotland has a new hate law.
That sort of
law.
Triviality doesn't concern us, you know.
Fridges that record when you've eaten food, that's what we're about. So
the fridge starts to use sizist slurs.
Yeah, they'll send Scotland round. So it says Scotland's hate... It's what in the article. Scotland's Hate Crime and Public Order (Scotland Act 2021. Update the year. It's just come into effect, isn't it? But you could get 7 years if you, here's the quote, communicate material or behave in a manner that a reasonable person would consider to be threatening or abusive, especially if you include their protected characteristics. And that comes back later. So she posted some April Fool's jokes, which were actually... They weren't jokes, was it? It was making a point. And she won't face arrest for this. Firstly, I would feel sorry for anyone sent around to arrest her if you can't afford a lawyer. Do you know what I mean? But then the police said they'll take no further action. I hope it's because of the ray of light in this, because a reasonable person test might be kicking in. If you can rely on the legal system to run that test. So it's not just you've said a word that people are offended by. It needs to be obvious that you were trying to cause harassment and you were including some of these words. I think
sure realistically, obviously she's trying to use a high-profile provocation to test and destroy the law, to prove that it can't be employed.
Yeah, and doing a very good job.
And she's done a great job to bring sort of ridicule down upon the whole thing. But it probably isn't actually a useful test, is it? I don't think it's demonstrated that you can, for instance, simply assert that trans women are men and no further action will be taken, because her doing it in such a high-profile way, they were obviously trying to avoid some confrontation on that scale, and I suspect it will still sooner or later catch somebody.
Right. Well, I would direct people to check out the Hate Monster from last night in Edinburgh, which is on my Twitter and on Comedy Unleashed's Twitter. The Hate Monster was there, and he'll or she, I'm not sure what is it, a he or she, I don't know. They will give you a rundown about this. Anyway, Rishi says it's not going to happen here, so that's great, isn't it? Because he's in charge for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, well, this is what, and we mentioned it as Steve hinted last night, and I'm sure I have done on many occasions, but the reality is that the Labour MPs in the Scottish Parliament were very nearly as keen. They certainly voted for this legislation, so there's no reason to suppose that these tweaks won't be brought before the Parliament.
Do you know, I think the best way to test the system to the point of failure is not high-profile people saying things. It's more about if there is a complaint, they've promised to investigate all complaints. Now, if you've got infinite police, fair enough, but they don't. So if people were just making complaints about things that weren't in any way likely to be caught by this act, they keep the police so busy that eventually realise you can't have this system in effect.
I think they've got something like 20,000 complaints being made in the first 24 hours, but they will probably just, sweep those away and just...
Well, you're reasonable...
Staying with the hate crimes in the Telegraph Cressida, this is a discrepancy between burglary clear-up rates and online squabble investigations, I think has been identified.
That's right. Police recording petty rows as hate crimes despite pleas from ministers. So we know that last year the Home Office said, look, stop it, we're not having any more of this nonsense. Non-crime hate incidences are... they don't meet the criminal threshold, but sometimes they're being recorded anyway, and then they're recorded against somebody. So we were talking the other day, you were saying it might be the case that if you're volunteering at a school or something like that, those are the sort of...
your CBD check.
Right, because you might think, well, what does it really matter? But it does matter, because it goes against your name and so on. So the police are still doing this. They've been told not to. And, of course, this is while trad crime is not being investigated. There's just these horrendous...
Trad crime, I like that.
Yeah,
a bit like trad wives.
I think so, yeah. It's your good old-fashioned crime, you know, the real
crime
ones,
that knows
burglaries.
How to bake.
Exactly. And it's not, that stuff's not.
But there is a lot of this. I mean, somebody was sharing on Twitter earlier the little film of somebody using, and maybe I shouldn't even mention that this is a possibility now, but a battery-powered axle grinder, I think they're called, to basically go through a bike lock in about 30 seconds and make off with the bike.
Right.
And this would be a terrible thing if this becomes a widespread phenomenon in London, because you just know the police will have no interest at all in trying to track down that kind of thing. Apart from anything else, that axle grinder could be turned on a human face. The people who use it might easily be carrying a knife, whereas somebody who sent a mean tweet is a fairly easy sort of form to be filled in, isn't it?
Well, you say that until they tweet a nasty thing about you for all the arresting that you've done. I think, well, the police should be following the instruction of the Home Secretary, because it's not like I've loved all the recent Home Secretaries, but at least I know who to vote out if I disagree. If you have a system where the Home Secretary says one thing, the police does another, you're very much powerless to have any control over it as a citizen. I mean, this was set up following the Stephen Lawrence case. This is what I talk about so often, the unintended consequences of a badly phrased law.
Yes.
And this is what you've got, something that was meant to provide a purpose, but now people are just adding to a record of this person might be a bit racist in the future or might be transphobic in the future.
What do you think the purpose was in connection with Stephen Lawrence, that before it even got to the point where they attacked and murdered him, they would have been arrested for, or there would have been an intervention from the police because they...
Yeah. Probably not arrested, because what we're talking about is something
it's
that
a
doesn't
non-crime,
hit,
yeah.
Non-crime. And the other thing I was going to say is, isn't a CBD test whether you're high on that oil or not?
Yes, it might be. Yes, I might have got my CBT, but that's whether you can ride a moped, isn't it? That's yes.